What is up, guys? It is Styx here, and today I'm going to be going over what I believe to be the best PvE build in general right now, at least from what I have been using. This build does amazingly at defending yourself in sticky situations. It does amazingly at doing tons of damage to both single targets and in AoEs to ads and such. And the weapons on it are very customizable in that they are very effective regardless of what weapons you pick, as long as you stay within a couple of specific ones. I'd say the only required weapon here is the exotic. And before we get right into the build, I do want to thank my first Patreon, Stephen Carr. If you wish to join them, then you can look at the link in the top of the description. Feel no pressure to do so. There's not going to be any gatekept content or anything like that. Now, starting with the subclass, we're going with Broodweaver, the Strand Warlock. The super is Needle Storm. It's the only one we can pick. We're going to go with the Healing Rift for the continuous healing. That's usually better in these kinds of activities. Burst Glide for the boost of speed. Arcane Needle is the only melee, but it's a very important part of the build. We're going to be using the Threadling Grenade. However, if you want to use Grapple for any kind of movement or needing to get around really quickly, that is completely fine. The Threadling Grenade is not really all that required. It's just nice to have. We're going to be using Weave Walk. Pressing our dodge while airborne consumes melee energy. That's why the melee is important. And we enter the weave, gaining damage resistance, which will allow us to get around and take, I think it's like 90-something% less damage. And we are able to reactivate it and just exit it whenever we'd like. In addition to that, we will continue to generate perched threadlings. I believe one full melee charge and then a little bit more is equivalent to an entire set of 5 threadlings. And then the Wanderer, all tangles that we throw or destroy will detonate into suspending bursts, and all threadling final blows will create a tangle. This does not specify threadlings created by your grenade, so this also applies to any threadlings that come from fragments or threadlings that come from things like the hatchling perk on weapons. The fragments we are going to be using, of which there are only 3, are Thread of Generation, which is the most changeable one in my personal opinion. I've definitely also had some fun with using Thread of Finality, which causes finisher final blows to create threadlings, as Thread of Generation just makes it so dealing damage generates more grenade energy. So there are some ways to get around that and sort of switch it up. Another thing that could be nice would be Thread of Warding. Picking up an Orb of Power grants Woven Mail, but it takes away 10 resilience. And the 2, in my opinion, required fragments here are Thread of Evolution. Threadlings travel farther and deal additional damage, also gives 10 intellect. This ups the damage by like 5,000 or 6,000 per threadling, which is really significant. And Thread of Rebirth. All strand weapon final blows have a chance to create a threadling. This sort of, I believe, fills up a little meter, is how it works, and you basically, depending on the thing that you're killing, affects a lot how it fills up and how it works, and then it will spawn a threadling once you reach that point. Like, I think boss enemies will guarantee spawn a threadling every single time. Majors have like an escalating large percent chance, and then minors have an escalating smaller percent chance. But this is most certainly the cornerstone of this build. This is what I built it around. Our stats, we're going to be aiming for max resilience. Then we are going to up our discipline as high as it can go, just because throwing more grenades is good. And then we'll go into recovery, which will affect our well. Now, on to our armor pieces. Starting off with the exotic armor, Swarmers. Destroying a tangle spawns a threadling. Your threadlings unravel targets that they damage. This is good because they are going to be strand debuffed targets, which means they can also create tangles when you get more kills on things that have been hit by threadlings, even if the threadling itself doesn't kill them. And you're going to be spawning so many tangles with this setup. There have been times when I've cleared out a entire wave of enemies in Onslaught, and I just see like 4 or 5 tangles pop up. And if you could turn those all into threadlings, you can just wipe the floor with waves and waves of enemies. It's not even a problem. Now, onto the general armor mods. This is going to be very much more of the same in comparison to previous builds I've done, but there are some very important things to keep in mind. Now, we're going to go with Heavy Ammo Finder and Harmonic Siphon. Harmonic Siphon, in this case, improves the strand weapon. Orbs of Power, we will generate those. And then obviously Heavy Ammo Finder gives us a chance of heavy ammo on kill. If you have the energy for it, I recommend running either whatever your energy weapon is, Orbs of Light, or running Special Ammo Finder, but I do not have that energy on my helmet, so I'm using Heavy Ammo Scout so that my teammates can get access to the heavy ammo I'm creating. On the gauntlets, I am going to say Harmonic Loader is pretty nice here. We're going to be using a specific strand weapon that needs to be reloaded as quickly as possible. It's going to be a big source of arc damage. And then I'm going to be running Momentum Transfer. Causing damage with a grenade reduces your melee cooldown. I'm then going to be using Bowstring Detonation, which grants class ability energy whenever I cause damage with a grenade. As you can tell, this is going to be centered around causing damage with the grenade, and then that damage with the grenade causes me to get my other abilities back faster. Now, in the case of your chest piece, this is going to be super dependent on what you want. I personally am going with 1 solar resistance and 2 arc resistances. This is because this is set up prioritized for Onslaught, and that's the damage that I think is the most important to guard against an Onslaught. If you're in a raid or something, or in specific Pantheon encounters, tailor it to the encounter if you know, and if you don't know, just run like Concussive Dampener and Sniper Resistance. And then onto the boots, I'm going to recommend double, or if you can use it, triple Strand Weapon Surge. This is going to kick up that damage another notch on our kinetic and our heavy weapon, because I'm intending on both of those being strand. And then on the bond, I'm going to recommend time dilation so that our armor charge lasts for 15 seconds instead of 10. Powerful attraction so that whenever we use our rift, we collect nearby orbs of power. And bomber so that whenever we use our rift, our grenade cooldown is reduced. Now, weapons wise, we've got a couple of options here in each of the slots. First of all, our exotic is going to be a strand primary weapon. So I'm going with Final Warding. If you have Lightfall, this is incredibly easy to get. You just need to unlock all the strand stuff, which now they're half off. If you don't have the materials needed to unlock every strand fragment, then just run around inside of Neomuna and you will see these little orange crystals, and you just grab them and you're good. They'll give you more than enough from grabbing a bunch of them than you need to get your fragments. Once you do get the sidearm, you can just put it on. If you hate Final Warding for some reason, you just don't like it, you can use Quicksilver Storm, but it's not as good. I'm just gonna tell you that right now. Final Warning is the best thing you can possibly have in the slot. And what you're gonna wanna do with Final Warning is you're gonna wanna hold down the trigger instead of firing like you would normally with a sidearm, and you're always going to want to go for those precision hits. It does a ton of damage. For our special weapon, this is going to be the most to do whatever you want. So I like running the Summoner in Onslaught because I use my other weapons so much that the only time I ever pull out my energy weapon is when I need to break an overload champion. That's it. I realistically do not need this weapon for anything else. Now, for raid boss damage, I could see running a few things. I could see you running a Slide Shot Reservoir Burst Glacioclasm, for example. I could see you running something like if you have a Slug Shotgun that's damage based. I could see you running a Wave Frame if you're really interested in running a special weapon and you just want a bit more of that AoE. But it's completely up to you what you want to run. I also like this Izumi RR4 Bottomless Grief Vorpal weapon. It has 7 shots in the mag. It lets them out really quickly. So just put whatever you want here, depending on the activity you're doing. And a similar thing can be said of this final sort of heavy slot. When I'm in Onslaught, there are 2 weapons I'm going to recommend. Cataphract GL3 with Hatchling, and Demolitionist on it if you want to really go hard into making as many Threadlings as possible. And then if you have Hatchling on it, the Mercado 45. Mine does not have Hatchling on it. It's the only role I've gotten the entire season, triple tap Onslaught, which is not bad at all. It's just not Hatchling, so it doesn't work as well with the build. But if you're going for other objectives, for example, if you need boss damage because you're in a raid encounter, you can always just swap on that Edge Transit, Envious Assassin bait and switch with a boss spec. And if you've got spike grenades on it too, you're golden. If you need a rocket launcher, Slide Shot Explosive Light Crux Termination works completely good. Or even better, an Apex Predator. Because if you run an Apex Predator with Reconstruction and bait and switch, so that you can just go even harder into the Strand Solar thing on the seasonal artifact, and it works totally good. But yes, so for the weapons, aside from Final Warning, everything else is reasonably customizable. Just try to, if you're in Onslaught, keep to a strand heavy weapon. That way you can still benefit from our fragments. And then for the seasonal artifacts, this is going to matter quite a bit depending on what you're going for. The main things we are going to be looking at here is obviously Overload Auto Rifle if you're going to be running Overload. I like to run every single one of these champion perks, so I like to do that. If you don't, then do as you wish with all of these anti-champion stuff. You're going to want Flame Fiber and Freeze for if you are in a situation where you are running a solar energy weapon or 2 solar weapons in the form of your energy and your power. That way you can create orbs with everything. Blast radius is entirely up to you. If you're running a special grenade launcher, a heavy grenade launcher, or a heavy rocket launcher, then you'll be totally good with running blast radius and you'll get extra armor charge. From Whence You Came, I would say is required. Doing ability damage to Taken and Scorn combatants. This will include your threadlings from your grenade, so it is very worth it to do, as well as your super, obviously. Now, keep in mind, I built this a little bit for Azumi, so I'm running Flint Striker, so rapid solar precision hits will make me radiant, so I do extra damage. And Torch, so that while I'm radiant, I deal increased weapon damage to combatants affected by strand debuffs. This includes the Unravel, this includes the Sever, this includes everything that I put out. And then the next 2 required after that, in my opinion, are Unraveling Orbs. Whenever you pick up an Orb of Power, it gives all of your strand weapons Unraveling rounds. In addition to that, Torch Shuttle. Damaging unraveled targets with a weapon occasionally spawns a threadling. This just makes it so your final warning produces so many threadlings that it's bonkers. It's absolutely wild. So you're going to be able to do as much as you want with that. And with that, I am going to say that that's the build. If you enjoyed this build, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, etc. If you want to support me, I informed you that at the beginning of the video. And thanks for watching. Peace, gamers.